Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tea with Rich without hearing myself echoing in the background. Today, we are privileged to have another new guest here. We welcome Dylan Runne, formerly of Fenom Ventures, to the podcast. How you doing, Dill?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, guys. Good to see you both.
I
Good to
appreciate
see you,
you
brother.
making the time. Rich, how are you doing today from Mexico?
Things are good. Things are always great down here in Mexico. It's tough.
Dylan, I'm going to freestyle a little intro on you, which I actually never do. Usually we shoot the shit for 10 to 40 minutes and we forget about intros. So I actually wrote something down. I'm not usually this prepared, but for a quick backgrounder for anyone that doesn't know Dylan, which is probably hardly anybody, Dylan is the founder and former CEO of Fenom Digital, an agency focused on enterprise, what I would call enterprise level commerce projects, stand-ups, design, development, and ongoing support on the Commerce Cloud platform, specifically the former Demandware platform. And a worthy competitor that came up during COVID and snuck up behind all of us and ran right over quite a few of us, actually. What you did in 5 years was amazing. Fenom Digital was eventually purchased by WPP. For those that don't know, one of the biggest three agencies in the world, where Dylan eventually took over revenue and operations for North America for VML, which is WPP's version of their giant global commerce agency that does all the platforms. Dylan also the founder of Fenom Ventures. Currently a general partner at Bambu Ventures and an investor and board member with BambuMeta. And prior to this, I believe you were just a regular dude with a regular job, a couple regular jobs, and a stellar mentor or three, with goals of being an entrepreneur. So, fuck, dude, congratulations. I met you just coming out of COVID in New York, actually. So,
Yeah.
how was that? Did I miss anything? For some reason, I thought you were with media
No,
at one point.
it is. It's funny. You pretty much nailed it, and I appreciate the kind words there. I was just trying to be like you guys. That's pretty much sums it up. But it's funny. The real story, and I don't think
But you're
anyone
like
knows this.
half our age, you know that,
Hey,
right? I
hey, hey,
mean,
hey!
I,
Don't do the half
you guys
our
look
age
so
thing. That
good,
just makes
man.
it worse.
The funny thing is, we were talking about NRF, before we jumped on here, and I think the real story, Rich. I don't even know if I told you this, but I had this way of kind of bullying my way into things that I wasn't supposed to be doing when I was at Accenture. So I was a business analyst at Accenture, and it was part of the Media Hive group at that time. They were just acquired by Accenture about a month before I got there, and I was working on Lucky Brand jeans, doing support and maintenance for Commerce Cloud. Ended up kind of being the project manager, built a good relationship and rapport with some of the executives there. So I created this narrative at Accenture that I just had to go to NRF this year, right? And really, my whole basis for going to NRF was like I didn't even know what it was. I just figured I had to be there to figure out what this whole world looked like. And I live 40 minutes from New York, so I took the ferry over that morning and got my 1 day pass and was wandering around and pretty much just following anyone who I thought looked like they knew where they were going or was going to be part of a conversation I wanted to be involved in. And we were sitting outside of the Salesforce booth and we were in a circle. And when I say we were in a circle, I was like behind the circle trying to like poke my head up in it. And it was you two, I want to say Vince Santo, and like maybe two or three other people. Rory might have been there, a couple other people, and I was just trying to listen in. And I think TJ, you go, I'm drinking from a fire hose. There's too much work in the Demandware ecosystem right now, and I think that was my light bulb. And I'm like, holy shit, I got to go figure out how to do this. And I was, maybe 23, 24 at the time, and no idea what I was getting myself into. And I think it was like another year later that I kind of just started putting this in my head that I think there's something here. And, quite frankly, at Accenture, we started dropping the ball and stuff. And, it's typical roll up acquisition, rates went up, quality went down, everything went India offshore. And, our clients were quite frankly getting pissed at us. And I was kind of taking the brunt of that. And it just had this little thing in the back of my head of someone's drinking from a fire hose here. And I got to be able to go take some of that work somehow. So that's really
what
where
I hear from that is that TJ basically is the one that invited you in, and so he fucked it up by creating another competitor by saying that.
Well, I think the comment that I
I
made
mean,
was there's enough deer in the woods for everybody, right? There's a lot of deer in
Yeah.
the woods, but I don't remember you being there, dude. That's the funny part, and I love
I was
hearing that.
Yeah, I was
That's
decoy
awesome.
in my blazer there in the background, trying to disguise myself and fit in.
It's so funny because you like, I remember I said to Rory, I'm like, the first time I ever met you was like we're coming out of COVID and Rory hosts a gathering at one of those shitty little bars he likes to bring us all to. And there's this giant long table and it's literally like the first time we're all together after COVID and everyone's got their little fucking vax cards and stuff. And we're all there and you come in. I of course have the other head of the table. I'm at the window and you come in, you're in like fucking loafers, your hair is slicked back, you're wearing a jacket, like what at the time I was like fucking I don't even know what the fuck it was, and you go sit at the end and you don't say anything. There's like 15 of us at this table and Rory's right next to me and I was like, hey, he's like, what's up? I'm like, who the fuck is that at the end? He goes, oh, that's Dylan from Fenom. I go, the fuck is Fenom? And he's like, oh, they do what you guys do. He's like, they're kind of the new Pixel and like the new Lions, which I took as a compliment from Rory. And I was like, the what? He's like, oh yeah, he's fucking on a tear. I go, I go, he's fucking dressed kind of weird. Like, what's up with him? And Rory looks at me and he literally goes, he's really good people. You should let him in. And I was like, all right, he's in. Fucking. And then I didn't talk to you that time, but I forget the first time we actually had a dialogue. But I remember that first time very distinctly.
I remember that too. That little Irish bar in Midtown Manhattan. Yeah, Rory texted me and told me to come by, and yeah, everyone was holding court there, and I kind of snuck into the background. That was the first time coming out of COVID, right? Like before that, I mean, the 2 years of COVID, I was just in my house. Well, I moved to Arizona for one of our clients, but we weren't on the road, and no one was out there. Yeah, no one was moving around. So that I think that was NRF. That was the first one back. So it was a lot of people I was talking to on the phone here and there, but never in person.
I
That's
think it's
funny.
amazing. I think it's
Yeah, because
amazing
I
how
don't think I
big.
really.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
it's
Rich.
Well,
amazing.
I cold called Rich. I don't even people probably don't even know this story. I didn't know Rich from Adam down the street, right? But I knew obviously of him Lions and kind of just from being in the industry, but we never talked. And this is when we started kind of picking up some steam, probably 2021 time frame. So we were, I don't know, maybe heading to 100 people in that point in time. And um, I saw Rich post on LinkedIn that he was leaving Cap and
Yeah.
didn't know what he was doing next and all that. And I had a couple people at the time that worked for Lions previously, so I started pinging everyone and said, "Hey, I need Rich Lyons' number. I need Rich Lyons' number." And so I think Tony LaRusso shot me over the
Yeah, I think it
number.
was Tony. Yeah.
Yeah, I picked up the phone and said, "Hey, Rich, it's Dylan Runne. You don't know me, but I know you, and I got something I think I need you to get involved in." And kind of pitched Rich on being, advisory board member and jumping in, and that was the start of that. But yeah, that was a cold call in itself.
That was awesome. Yeah, because I was going to say, I don't think I really ran into you much because I sold the Cap in 17.
Yeah,
And
you
then I was
started
out in
before.
21. So, I mean, we didn't have that much interaction, I don't think,
No.
until after. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, I was Accenture 17, 2018, and then
I don't.
we kicked off April 2019.
I
Okay.
don't think we ever. I don't think I'm not aware of ever like directly competing with you. Oddly enough, you were just going in and fucking
I don't
snaking these
think
deals. Leslie Pools
I
being
don't
the
think we
big
ever
one.
directly. Leslie's was a crazy one. The whole background of when I started Phenom was I had this idea, right, and I called up my now partner mentor for my whole life, Richard Hearn, who's been in the industry a long time, had a Hybris agency, had an Adobe agency. He went on and ran WebSphere for IBM for a period of time. And he was in New York, and I called him up and said, "Listen, man, I think I'm getting ready to do something. I might have a client, but I don't even know where to start." He said, "All right, meet me at the bar." So we met at this East Village Scratcher right outside the East Village Standard, and sat down and started drawing on paper. I mean, it's the true startup story, right? Like no joke, napkin. I'm drawing out what I'm doing, and like first of all, the business model I drew out would not work, right? But I didn't know any better. So I was kind of sold this vision. He was like, "All right, man, I'm in. Like, I'm going to write the money off now, but let's do it." And, I quit my job from Accenture on the way home and called up Leslie's Pools, which is the guy, Kyle Pretch, who near and dear friend of mine now. And we work together now today. But he was previously at Lucky Brand, went over to Leslie's as their VP of IT and commerce, and he was kicking off this massive project with Salesforce in Manhattan, and God, he was ripping and replacing everything. They acquired 5 businesses, and they were going from 180 million in revenue to like $1.5 billion in revenue inside the same year, and had to pretty much figure out how do we do this online, and how do we consolidate all these brands onto consolidated systems. And I said, listen, man, I need to take a bet on this. I said, I'll put a team together for you. And he said, yeah, no way. He's like, I'm going Deloitte. I'm not risking my job on this. I was like, what's Deloitte's number? And he rattles off some, $8-9 million deal. And I'm like, call it $1.6 million, fixed bid. Let's do it. And he was like, I'm not losing my job over this, man. Like, come be a project manager for me, whatever. And so I ended up flying out to Phoenix and kind of pitched him on this proof of concept that we were going to integrate down in Manhattan so we could do end-to-end testing before the commerce sites were launching, and kind of said, listen, if I get this proof of concept launched in the next 4 months, which like biting off that in itself was a train wreck, and but you do what you got to do. And I said, if I get it launched in 4 months, I either will repay you all the money, or if I don't get it launched in 4 months, I'll repay you all the money. But if I do get it launched in 4 months, I want all the other sites.
Wow.
So I just took a big swing, and he said, fine, February 15th of 2020, this thing's got to launch. And February 15th, 8:40 in the morning, this thing launched. And I said, here's your SOW, sign the rest of the deal. And he held up his end and signed us on for another 5 sites and another couple $1 million in business, and we were off and running at that point.
That's an amazing story, and for any young person listening to this, the part that Dylan hasn't gotten to yet, if you really want to know how to be successful, is after you get that opportunity and somebody gives you that gift, because it is a gift, it takes a lot of balls to do it, but you then have to go fucking live there in a hotel pretty much down the street, and do 18-hour days, 7 days a week, and do that for a few years, and that's how you get successful. So I don't want anybody thinking that we do this from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Like, you literally lived down the street, right?
Yeah, 14 months I moved there for Airbnbs, hotels, some mostly in the office. I got locked in the office one night, had to sleep there under a desk. Possibly locked in the office on purpose. I think I was behind schedule on something. And Kyle, I hope he watches it at some point, has a unique way of working some days. So I think he had some strategies to make sure I couldn't leave that night. But yeah, that was a stretch, and we couldn't really. Part of the deal was in the SOW, I had to deliver the project. So, and part of that was being on site to deliver the project. So I was the project manager, delivery lead, BA for the first 14 months there. And really, it wasn't until month 12 that I was even able to go start trying to sell another deal. And at that time, we sold the PacSun deal, which was migration SFRA, and then kind of came Hot Topic, and we closed Mitchell Gold Bob Williams, which was an old Lions contract.
All those were old Lions customers. Is the funniest thing. Like, we had PacSun way back, and we had Hot Topic way back. I mean, it's funny how they all come back, right?
Yeah, it's all cyclical, and someone else is probably picking them up now, and So yeah, that was probably the snowball effect at that point. But
I think it's a fucking great story, dude, and I was so proud of you when I got a chance to really meet you and spend some time with you. And for those that don't know, Dylan and I hanging out together is like a multiplier that probably shouldn't be allowed in any evening establishment. But and then watching you flip it to WPP, which you did respectfully and cleanly and well. That was a good acquisition. WPP was not going to be denied, especially after IPG picked us up and all the other turmoil going on. And you want to talk about selling at the perfect time. I think the moment you sold, within about 6 weeks, the wheels kind of started falling off commerce in general, right? There was this sort of post-COVID. Yeah, post-COVID slowdown. It was like the hangover kicked in, and everybody was either dehydrated or throwing up. So,
I mean, like I would say, it's better to be lucky than good sometimes, and we definitely hit the timing luck there. I mean, the industry was slowing down towards the back half of 2022, but deals were still coming in, right? There was no indicators that the floor was going to fall out, but we closed on the transaction December 9th and officially announced it February or January 5th, sometime in that time frame. But by February, like, the backlog started eating away, deals weren't closing, Salesforce was calling frequently, that deal fell, this deal fell, and you start looking out 12 months, and the runway wasn't nearly there what it was the year before. So I think WPP did well on it, and they've been able to parlay it into some larger Salesforce deals, because they had a ton of business with Ford in the marketing cloud space, and Microsoft, and a ton of other big deals that were substantial Salesforce clients. So being able to tack on the commerce component was good for them. But yeah, the Salesforce ecosystem that following year it was rough. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's, I have some thoughts on it coming back pretty strong, but it was a rough year there.
Yeah, we're seeing a change of tides. I think what was interesting was that it got WPP back in the good graces of Salesforce Commerce Cloud too, right? Because we had the old Grady issue with him getting kicked out with Gorilla, and that's a whole other story. That if someone wants to fact check me on that, you go right ahead. But it was their entrance back into kind of being the belle of the ball too, right? In the big three getting back closer with Salesforce. And I think WPP's always been a machine, and they've always made good acquisitions and done good work along with IPG and the other bigs. So let's
It's
kind
cool
of.
seeing really the four. Yeah. I was saying it was cool seeing kind of the big four agencies between Publicis, IPG, Omnicom, and WP make a big push into commerce in that same time frame. Because it went quite a few years without anyone doubling down really. So it was
Yeah.
cool to see the investment.
Well, the funny part was the bigs really, other than Sapient, almost didn't want anything to do with commerce. So the big three, let's take Sapient out and say Omni, WPP, and IPG. They kind of was like a side hustle. They weren't really serious about it. And then I don't know who did Omnicom pick. I don't know who Omnicom bought, but I know we got bought by
They
IPG. Rich,
Yeah, Omnicom picked up a couple broader commerce agencies. I think the biggest thing is like agencies speak different commerce language than we do, right? Commerce doesn't mean the same thing.
yeah,
Commerce is shopper for them and
yeah,
ad, driven activation,
yeah.
where we are more technology based commerce. So like there's definitely times where we're speaking different languages on leadership meetings there, and we had to do a lot of education to get WPP back to focused on what commerce really meant. And that kind of goes back to the Wunderman Thompson acquisitions of
Right.
Gorilla and all those.
Gorilla.
Like that consolidation of businesses was really a catalyst to help WP understand, commerce as the sense that we know
Well,
it.
and they did like Peary, right? They got Marketing Cloud in there. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think IPG's
yeah,
on a run there too, with Ed and Jay Z, and Borman's over there now. And commerce, it's funny that you make that distinction, that the way that the big agencies think of commerce and the way that we as digital natives think of commerce is very different. We think of it as the kernel of everything out, and everything feeds into it, and they think everything
yeah.
else is the kernel, and it's feeding some mythical beast that they don't yet understand. So interesting. So I was going to say before we got on that was that. So you're out of VML now. Have been for, I'd say, probably, I'm going to say several months. But what are you up to these days? I mean, I kind of know what you're up to. I know you're volunteering your time at a lot of places, but what's going on? What's a day in the
Yeah,
life professionally for you now?
yeah. I'm back to the startup grind a little bit, which is fun. But about probably a year ago, almost to date, my business partner and I, Richard Hearn, got back together, and we said, we think there's a next opportunity in venture capital, and it came out of both of us being burned a little bit on some private investments that we put out there, and burned and getting involved in a couple other venture capital funds that, my view is they run on hopes and dreams, and we all know that's not a strategy. So there was a little bit of this chip on the shoulder to be like, man, people are not being good stewards of other people's money, and I think we have a way to look at businesses a little bit differently than other people, and said, why don't we go try to do this at a little bit more formal scale than us just investing on our own. So we kicked off a company called Bambu Ventures, which is a formal venture capital fund focused on SaaS, customer engagement, kind of seed, pre-seed space. Raising a fund right now. Richard and myself seeded the fund and deployed that capital already into about 6 companies. So one of those companies was called Billfold Point of Sale. Needed a little bit more help than your average seed startup, and really good business, growing 45% year over year, but a little heavy on the cash burn. So about June of this year, as I was starting to kind of plan my exit of VML and what it was next, this kind of opportunity just from us being involved at the board level on Billfold came up to say, there's a founder there who's just really bright and super charismatic and has a great vision, just struggling on execution a little bit. And, I think execution is obviously the name of the game here. So I said, well, let me go see if I can help him out a little bit. So I started talking to him, and he was burning heavy cash and didn't really know how to restructure the business and where they needed to focus. So I kind of started putting some plans together and said, why don't I come jump in with you as CEO for a little while and help you out? And, we'll come up with some structure that doesn't affect the business. And there's your volunteering, comments. And I said, let me help you get through Series A. I said, I got a pretty good path to do this. I understand the process here. And yeah, that's been my day to day. So I actually ended VML August 1st at 8 a.m. and I started Billfold at 8:01 a.m. In New York City on August 1st and dove right back into it. So that's kind of been my full-time gig while, supporting some of the fundraising stuff. But I've kind of been focused on helping these guys get successful. So, we're about we'll be 6 months in really by the end of the year and uh, moving pretty aggressively towards Series A in March, and the business is on a little bit better trajectory right now. So it allowed me to kind of flex a muscle I didn't have to flex previously, which was kind of the turnaround type of scenario. And I think it also proved something out to myself that, okay, there wasn't all luck on the first one. I did have a little bit of a playbook to run, and the mentorship that really you guys and other people around me have provided, like, we can put this to action and help other entrepreneurs that are in this position and help other people be successful. And I'm a big believer in, like, success is not a finite resource. There's enough to go around for everyone. So let's share it out there and help people get to where everyone else is.
It's not a finite resource, and so much of it is unnecessary battling. How interesting was it going into a new place and the intimidation factor? Like, hey, let me just come in and take over as CEO, which is probably the funniest line I've heard in a week, but for a little bit, and then getting in there and kind of like seeing you're like, holy shit, like basic things that you've kind of cut yourself on 100 times previously. So what was that like going in there and kind of all these maybe not glaring good and bad sort of habits that you ran into?
Yeah, I mean, I think first thing, like, me and my bright blazers were public enemy number one day one, right? Like, this is a Brooklyn-based, point of sale company that focuses in the live events and entertainment space, right? So, like, you think nightclubs, you think the Brooklyn Mirage, you think, some of the probably most historic nightclubs in New York City, or that's what this business was built on. We've done, EDC now. We do outside lands. We're working on some really big engagements. But if you look at me, right, that's just not my game. I'm probably a little more corporate than they were used to. So, you walk in with your preconceived notions a little bit, and you say, "This is what we're going to go focus on." And I think as long as you had an open mind and listened to everyone, I think the issues were glaring, right? But it wasn't. We had to do some discovery, right? It wasn't all just on the nose type of stuff. And at a surface level, there was a lot of questions of, like, I don't exactly know why some of these things are going in the direction. So it took us probably 2 months to really uncover the major challenges, right? And, like, at that point, there's a bunch of surface level tactical things that you're like, okay, we need to have a management structure in place. We need to have leadership meetings. We need to establish KPIs. We need to understand the historicals of finance so we know what we're doing, where we're going. Once we understood kind of all the super high level tactical stuff, getting into more of the strategic things, that it just became more and more clear, what we needed to do. Events have low gross margin. It's one time. Venues are everyday revenue. Like, we need to pivot more towards event or venues, right? Self-service hardware. We can't send 5 people to an event for 5 days to set up the hardware and tear it back down. We need to be focused on self-service because it costs me 20 grand to send 5 people there, right? It eats my whole margin. So it starts to become super in your face type of problems, but then you have to figure out what that strategy is to go solve those problems. And that was the fun part. So yeah, I mean, it was just energized about it, right? Like, you know how it is. You go into kind of big corporation, a lot of red tape, and you're trying to keep your dream alive of being the entrepreneur, but it's not your business anymore. And I think that was the number one thing I heard day one when I walked into VML, when I was trying to probably project myself onto them, was, it's not your business anymore, man. Like, we appreciate your insights, but we just wrote you a nice check for that business, so let us do what we do. And it was exhausting, right? So going into Billfold, like, you just kind of get this re-energized feeling, and I think we're having fun with it. It's challenging because you didn't build the business, right? So you have to have respect for the founders who did put the sweat and tears into it. So you don't want to come in and just say, okay, we're cutting over here, we're cutting over here, because it's the people, right? It's the people that they've put in place there, and you got to be respectful of that. But you got to help bring them along to understand why we're doing some of these things and what the long-term outcome is, and bring them along with you. So, I'm able to step out of this business at some point in the future, and they can kind of take back over and start running it. So that's the goal there, is get them through Series A and kind of transition it back, and hopefully they learned a thing or two through 12 months of kind of being with me there.
Yeah. Almost like a entrepreneur in residence, CEO in residence program, which is entrepreneur in
Yeah.
residence thing is like a new, very very popular thing that's going on now. I know that's not what you're doing, but it's kind of has some ties to that. Other, and obviously you have a stake in there. I'm guessing, is that the only thing you got going on? I feel like you gotta have you must have. I feel like you're juggling five balls all the time, and that's
Yeah, I
professionally.
mean, we
Never
have,
mind the cooking, which we'll get to.
yeah, the cooking is obviously taking precedent right now, but no, yeah, I mean, we have this other company called BambuMeta, which is, again, customer engagement on the wallet card platform. So Apple Wallet, Samsung Wallet, Android Wallet, really, real-time communication, dynamic communication through wallet cards. And that business was something that I helped co-found in 2022. We funded it through the Fenom Digital business before we kind of broke it out into its own entity, and ended up raising a formal seed round and brought on some pretty notable investors to help. Happy to have you involved there. But this one is kind of where I think the future's going from retail, consumer goods, and really all forms of communication of like where I want to be communicated with, when I want to be communicated, and how I want to be communicated. Right? If you think about email, everything goes to spam, text messaging saturated. But when you get a wallet card or you download that wallet card, you're acknowledging that like I want to have communication from this brand, and then we have the ability to communicate with you when you want and where you are, right? So that geolocation component of it's really really important as well. So that business is taking off. They're kind of right at the crux of getting that first really big name client that's we've all had and kind of built businesses on top of. But they have Coca-Cola closed, they have Starburst closed, they have Obamacare closed. They have some pretty notable brands on the platform already, and I think this next one is kind of that next evolution of the business there. So I sit on the board of directors there. Richard co-founded it with me. Kyle Pretch is now the president and operator of that business. So I mean, Kyle and I had a really good way of working together. We understood each other well. So Leslie's was a hard project, right? We launched 5 brands with a new OMS on Salesforce, loyalty, Omni, new tax, payment, fraud. I mean, you name it, we launched a new platform for it. Ampliance on CMS, right? Like the whole thing was ground up. We did it in 14 months, and we didn't miss a single deadline. And we launched it to the minute that we said we were going to launch to 14 months earlier. And
You
that's Kyle's
fixed it.
leadership, and we fixed it. And as much as Kyle doesn't believe, we did make some money on it. It didn't kill me 100%. But we had a really good way of working together. And then, he had a 5-6 year run at Leslie's, and that was kind of coming to an end. He did what he had to do there. And, through the first year of the company Bambu, I was heads down on Phenom. Richard was heads down on Phenom. We were focused on getting the business sold at that point. Kind of picked our heads up and looked at Bambu, and, we funded it pretty substantially through Phenom and through personal dollars. And, picked our head up before Shop Talk of 2023 and said, "Holy shit, you guys are burning 500 grand a month and you don't have a single dollar of ARR." I was like, "What the fuck happened here, guys?" And like, fault on our own, right? I'll take some blame here. But we called, the founders up or the co-founders up at the time and said, "What's the deal?" And everyone's got a good story. And Richard and I kind of went back to it and said, "Fuck, I don't know what to do right now. Like it's only has 500 grand left, and they're spending a month. So they got a month to burn." And I happened to be wandering around the Shop Talk floor and texted Kyle and said, "Hey, let's catch up for a drink and see what's going on." And he said, "Yeah, I'm starting to look for my next thing. Leslie's kind of come to an end." And I said, "Man, do I have the thing for you? Like this is right up your alley of turnaround." And he came in and quite frankly came back, worked all night, came back with a plan the next morning and said, "I'm going to get you 6 months of runway in 3 days." And I said, "If you can get me 6 months of runway in 3 days, like, let's do this thing. You're a partner. Let's go." And he built a plan out and executed on it and took the thing from $0 in ARR in April 23. And, it's going to cross the $3 million mark here shortly. And,
Wow.
raised a pretty substantial seed round and has the thing on a really strong trajectory. And, kudos to him for just this operational execution day in and day out. I mean, military type execution, but has also done a good job with people and some building some culture around it, right? Like, I think he gets a little bit of a bad rap on some of it, but he cares about the business, cares about the people, and he's doing great work there. So yeah, we're in it together now, which is super cool to bring people into that entrepreneurial kind of spirit and area, and we support each other all around. And he's involved in the venture fund, helping there as well. So yeah, it kind of came full circle.
He's a special kind of talent, and you want to talk about. I actually had a few conversations with him way back. I think Victoria or Z might have asked me to talk to him because if you couldn't get through a dialogue with him, you were DOA. But dude, what a special talent, and what a militant, like almost emotion free, like factual decision maker. Like everything he does is on the mission and the goal and in the end game, which it's hard. It's because a lot of us get distracted. I know I do. So kudos there. I do
For
think
sure.
it's
I mean,
amazing. Go ahead.
my ADD takes me in about 400 different directions a day, and yeah, I mean, he is probably the single most brilliant person I've ever met about more topics than I could, talk about, right? Like you want to go talk about the Cold War. He happens to have a master's in the Cold War, right? Like it's one of those types of scenarios where you ask, you're like, who the fuck would even know that? And he has the backstory and he's not bullshitting you, right? Like, so yeah, super special guy. Love having him as a business partner and being involved with him. So we have a good relationship.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So let's get off of work for a little bit because
Yeah.
we don't usually talk about this much work stuff. But you have such an interesting story, and it seems like you came up quick, but you didn't. You were sort of, growing and learning and behind you were doing it the right way. That's what we did, right? We all worked for somebody else and saw an idea and we just did it during different decades. But let's move off of work for a minute. What are you doing in your downtime? Like, dude, I've been with you. Like, you run hot. Like, what do you do to calm down and reset and kind of take care of yourself? Like, serious question. I know
Yeah.
those of us that have seen Dylan and I out together don't know why I would ask this, but like, what do you
Yeah,
do?
I mean,
exactly. How do you recover? Yeah.
I definitely like my late nights with TJ. But yeah, I mean, I have a couple things that I'm pretty deep in. Most people know, but I have a background in powerboat racing since I was 9 years old, third generation. So started that as really a hobby with my dad growing up, and my dad was successful at it, right? And it's a super grassroots thing, not a lot of publicity around it, but that was always my passion in life, and where I met some of my best friends in the world, and we did it all around the country together growing up, and then went to college and played baseball, and then got out of college and said, I want to do this at a little bit bigger level, and started racing slightly bigger boats in a more professional setting, and then had success up until COVID, and that was really the start of Fenom. So took a break from racing for a couple years stint, which was perfect because it let me go focus 100% on the business, and I wouldn't have been able to balance both at the time. And then as Phenom kind of got to some scale, people started calling me up at some of the highest levels in boat racing, which is H1 Unlimited powerboat racing. They're Chinook helicopter powered hydroplanes, make 3,000 horsepower. If you've ever seen the Miss Budweiser, I drove that boat.
That's
Um,
cool.
and yeah, about 200 miles an hour on water at the biggest scale in the world. So I got to do that for a year in 2023. I own a Formula One powerboat team that kind of started as Richard and I's COVID project, and then I kind of took that over. And I work on that boat myself. I have it in my shop here in my garage, and I have a semi truck that I drive around myself and tow it all over the country with some of my buddies who we put a team together. So we're probably the most underqualified, overperforming team on the F1 circuit. So people love to hope we fail, but we've managed to do pretty well. Um, but yeah, my passion is really around motorsports and getting my hands a little bit dirty. Like to me, driving race boats was definitely a getaway from work, right? It was the ability to go shut off all the change orders and all the pissed off clients and all the emails and put a lid down and say, I'm going to go, be 100% focused on something for the next, 2 hours of my day, and nothing else matters. And it was just a great release there. And then as I kind of transitioned out of driving, and I still will race here and there and have a ride, but as I've kind of transitioned more to the ownership thing, I get to go spend time project planning the team and putting the right people together and, ordering the right engines and building the boat. And so that's been a little of my passion. And then I think inspired by TJ, I've gotten into cooking a little bit lately as well. I'm determined to be able to cook for a group of people and not embarrass myself. So taking a couple cooking classes, went and overspent on cooking supplies because that's just my game. Um, and yeah, we're having fun with it. So
I think it's awesome the day that you send me. So you've come a long way with cooking because prior to the Surla table, like when you walked in for the first class, I think the last picture I have, I don't know where my phone is. I think you started a fire. And I don't know if it was a bunch of paper towels or a towel or whatever, but you were cooking a meal and like literally like a fire. And the
Oh yeah,
dude,
no, I've had two fires actually, pretty substantial. Uh, the first week I moved into my house in Florida, I almost burnt down the house with the grill, and I don't take full blame for that one, but it was pretty serious. Grill almost had to go in the pool. That was my game plan there when that was getting out of control, and then yeah, I dropped a couple paper towels on the gas stove that ignited there when I was doing some steaks on the skillet. But we've gotten better in the last couple months. We're cleaned it up a little bit. We're getting better. The Surla table classes have helped a little bit, but
you enjoy it though. Like I know you've been here and like you've watched me cook. Like it literally takes fucking hours, but like do you are you enjoying it? Like that whole process? Because it's interesting hearing you talk about boating because I cook because that's what it does to me. It like just shuts everything off in my head. So are you enjoying it, or is it still a bit of a like a uncomfortable chore?
no, I actually I do enjoy it. I mean, I love the process of anything, right? Of like building something, putting it together. So I kind of equate that to cooking. But it's also time for me to spend time with my girlfriend. I still travel a lot for work and live in Florida and New Jersey and balance that back and forth. So it's kind of a nice couple hours that we get to spend and drink a glass of wine or two and cook for each other and we enjoy it. So it's a little bit of a getaway from that extent as well. But I think it's more just the process of trying to make something good and make something work and learn something new.
So I don't think there's anything more intimate that you can do for friends than feed them, to be honest. So that's kind of my whole thing. I think that's the ultimate show of respect. You can buy anybody a gift. You could get a fancy watch, but when you sit down and you take the time and the care to and care about what you're making, even if it doesn't come out perfect, that imperfection is perfect. So I think it's cool that you're doing that. How do you take care of yourself, dude? Because I mean, I know you're young, but like, what's your health routine for yourself? Like, has B got
Yeah,
you
we've
on a
got a lot
facial
of
routine
conversations
yet?
about
Or
health routines. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I leaned on Rich a lot for this. I think I don't want to say unhealthy, but there was a year where I did 300 nights on the road and wasn't in the gym and was doing a lot of entertaining. And then when I wasn't entertaining, it was just, friends, right? More of the same. So a lot of late nights and was running myself dry and ended up just really sick for weeks at a time and just burning it kind of on both ends. And I kind of picked my head up and said, I gotta change something. And it was actually a girl, you guys are both familiar with Helena, who came to work for me. She worked for Rich and kind of was a mentee under Rich as well. But she was really focused on health and wellness. And I created a role which is a little controversial, I think, in companies today, but it was the chief of staff role, which at our scale was a little early, but it was so instrumental to our success of
I thought it
having
was brilliant. I mean, what you did was brilliant. And you picked a great person for it, and she loved it too.
it allowed us to scale, I would say 5 times faster, right? It multiplied myself and multiplied myself down into the business. But essentially, what she was the integrator between me and my entire executive team, right? So she was doing a lot of the legwork for me and really my support. And when I had a deck I needed to put together for the board, or whether it was when at WPP, if it was up, like she would kind of put the guts of it together, and she was just a really good support system. But she was super focused on health and wellness, and we became just really close friends through the process as well. And she almost kind of coached me through some of this because I was probably struggling mentally with how do you break away from it, right? I need to be out, I need to be entertaining, I need to have my face out there, but I'm also running myself dry, and my relationships are hurting at home, and I'm not spending enough time probably where I should be. And she helped me balance a lot of that too. So super grateful for that. But she got me back in the gym. She got me back in supplements. Just taking care of myself, and it was not about getting away from some of the stuff I was doing. Right, it was nothing bad. Right, you're just out drinking here and there and having cocktails. Right, but you do it enough nights in a row, it starts to wear on you. So it was really just about how do you counteract some of that stuff with vitamins and supplements and working out and being in the sauna. And Rich, I was gonna, I got my sauna and my cold plunge put in my house now and I use it every day. And it was just the little stuff, right? So I'm getting back into the gym a lot and just trying to stay more active. And I've been off the road quite a bit more, so it's just been good for health and being able to cook at home and healthier foods and all that. So Yeah, I mean, I think it's just all about balance, and I think it's about being a little bit more mindful about what you're doing every single day and why you're doing it and what really matters. I think young entrepreneurs, they feel that they have to be out there all the time, and I think you almost start to make this excuse of like, I need to be at that dinner, I need to go fly to Chicago, I need to go fly
Right.
to San Francisco to be there, and you don't really need to do it all the time, right? I think picking and choosing where and what is important is a really important piece to growing yourself as an executive, really,
Well, and I
because
think
you
from
need
a culture
yourself.
standpoint too, I mean, obviously you build a great culture. I mean, if you're depleted, you can't give anything to your people, you can't give anything to your customers. I mean, I think it has an impact that I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize.
Absolutely. And people saw it, and Helena was a great ear to the ground for me for the rest of the business. And like, I'm super proud of our retention. We retain 92% of our employees to the existence of Phenom. So like, I think if you ask me, one of the most things I'm proud of is just the culture we did build. But people saw when I was burned out, and people would say, "Is he checked out? Is he leaving?" Right? And it wasn't that. It was just I had nothing left to give. Right? They would hear we
Right.
would do our town halls, and they would hear to my voice of I'd just get off a red eye, and I'm trying to put a smile on, but you see the bags under your eyes, and your words aren't making as much sense as they once did. And yeah, I mean, I didn't have enough to give to everyone, and I owed everyone more than I could give them, and that was another point to me. Said I need to tone it back a little bit. I need to get off the road and focus on myself so I can be just as present for everybody else here.
I think that's a fucking brilliant observation, especially for somebody. I hate to say your
It's
age because I
awesome.
feel like you're an old soul, but you're a young dude. Like, I mean, you're young. You're 25 years
Totally.
younger than me. But it's funny that you say that. I first off think that Helena might be one of the most uniquely amazing people I've ever interacted with, and I think I became as close with her as I became with you because whenever we were out, she was there and doesn't drink, doesn't engage in any of the poor eating, really didn't partake in any of the foolishness, but was always there and always a good conversationalist. And I remember on your birthday, you posted some key photos, and one of them was you and I and her, probably sitting on the rail at Omnia, if memory serves me right. But dude, what a good person. I'd love to have her on here at some point because what she's done transforming her life is magical. But I love that you noticed that you were cooked. And one of the things that used to happen with me is when I got cooked, the the person that lost out was actually home, and I always mustered
Right.
everything for the office, I thought. And then what happened, interesting story, which I'll tell just because of what you said, Dylan, is that I had my engineering lead. His name was Ed Atwell, actually, and he was with me for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. And he came into my office one day, and, same thing as you. I mean, we're kindred spirits, a little apart. And, it's hard to work 12-hour days and then entertain till 6 in the morning and then be down at 7:30 for breakfast and do that a lot. Ed came into my office one day and like shocked me. And he says, "Hey," I'm like, "What's up?" He goes, "You okay?" I go, "Yeah." He's like, "Are you sure you're okay?" I go, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "Everyone on the floor is on edge." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "I don't know if you know this, but when you come, we had this door, this back entrance into the office, and we had a huge studio. Rich, you've been to the studio. It was
Yeah.
15,000 square feet wide open." And he goes, "If you come through that door with a smile and you're laughing and telling a story," he's like, "the entire floor is charged positively for the day. And when you come through that door with a scowl or tired and you don't say anything and you just have, because I have resting bitch face," he goes, "when you come through and you just don't say anything and you go right into your office," he goes, "literally the entire building like deflates." And he's like, it literally sets the tone for the day. And it was the first time, and I think it was probably at our 15th year, maybe of the 30. It was the first time anybody ever sat me down and explained to me the power that we had as entrepreneurs and owner operators, right? Because we're practitioners, to either
Yeah.
raise or lower the sort of energy level. And it fucking bummed me. I like Ed will probably never listen to this, but it like broke my heart because I just had like a shitty like interaction at the traffic circle a half a mile away. That was like why I came in all pissy that day. But it was the first time somebody ever said anything to me. And I love that you had somebody like Helena to kind of chat you through that shit and run blocker for you too, because that's another thing. We don't always have time to like do all the smiling. You can't shake all the hands and kiss all the babies. It's just there's too much other shit going on.
I mean, yeah, Helena's amazing for so many reasons, but she was a great blocker of the bullshit that you didn't need to deal with
Mhm.
and the stuff that you couldn't get inundated with. But she was also, a really good, just constant reminder of, dude, you're being an asshole. Like, let's tone it back a little bit. And also, your words matter, right? I kind of still viewed myself as like, dude, I'm just a BA who, writes requirements when I need to. And then you kind of forget that you're leading 250 people and you're responsible for their salaries, you're responsible for taking care of their families, and the things that you might just blurt out, it matters, right? People take it to heart. And I'm a sarcastic person. I joke around a lot. Um, Sometimes my sarcasm, my jokes might not be perceived the way I perceive them, and I make myself laugh probably more than I make others laugh sometimes. But she had to be kind of my reminder of, yeah, dude, you need to check yourself sometimes because it matters. So she was great for that. She was my handler at night. When it was time to go home, she was the one saying, "Dude, it's you're in the dark hours of the night. Nothing good happens after 2 a.m. Let's bounce out of here." And she was good for that. And there was probably only one or two times, most likely Omnia, where I said, "I'm sticking around. I got it." And she was probably right. I probably should have left, but we learn.
We've
That's
learned, and
awesome.
listen, I don't think nothing good happens after 2 a.m. I just think it gets progressively more expensive and hard to remember. But I don't regret. It's funny looking back on my run, right? When I had to do that stuff, entertain during the day and entertain at night. It for me, the night game was extreme networking, right? It was where we found out what people were really like, and we got to bring them into an environment like that they maybe will never be in before, and kind of see how they act. So I use the night routine, quite frankly, to stress test people and see, like, okay, if I put this person in this environment, because you can convince yourself that it's a free for all and you can kind of do whatever you want. It was really how I vetted a lot of people, quite honestly. I don't know if I've ever told that story out loud before, but
I
it
did
was.
as well.
I'm surprised we're still friends then, because you would have vetted me right out. I mean, come on.
Well, I had these three philosophies, right? Because I always had, listen, the guy who doesn't drink, love it, right? Know thyself. This is your game. If you're out, you're entertaining, you're playing the game. Then you had the guy who, drinks responsibly, works himself around the room. Then you have the guy who is off the deep end, who is a train wreck. And then you have the guy who's drinking heavy, but is holding his shit together and still holding court. And, I think there's a sweet spot in there, right? But I always judge, especially when we had new employees, I would take them out the first night they were there and just kind of watch them. And, I always was drinking. Sometimes I'd have a, club soda with some lime in it and just see how they interacted, right? Like I was never really showing my full hand all the time, but I also think networking late night, while it was just as much about the active and current business and clients, right? Like I think it was so much more about the industry too, of just meeting really, really good people that
Yeah.
become lifelong friends and colleagues, and it sets the future up, right? So like every time I was out, it wasn't always focused on the present. It was also focused on the future, right? And I think I've gained amazing friends and amazing mentors from that, right? And like I think this conversation speaks for that. We're sitting at an Omnia table 4 years ago, TJ, and have become great friends. Where I'm visiting him in New Hampshire, and you're coming to Florida, and we go away on vacation together, right? And Rich, the same, right? We spent so much time
Yep.
together through those types of experiences. It was one of those things where I left Shop Talk, and you almost felt sad, right? You just felt like you were
Yeah,
leaving this party with
absolutely.
all your friends, but you were also doing good for the future and good in the present as well.
Well, we went to Sonoma and represented like professionals after last year's shop talk. So we barely, I know the fact that we even made it to the flight is a literal miracle. But it's funny you talk about the long play on the night game when we're out, because I actually believe super high functioning folks don't shut down at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I think it's actually impossible. And good, bad, or indifferent, that's like that's a whole other level of interaction. And like, I don't know, intimacy is probably not the right word, but there's a relationship that gets built there. And I'm not talking about the drinking, because a lot of people don't know when you see me out, like, you know, I only drink half as much as anyone thinks, because the server always knows that every other drink needs to be a club soda with crayon in it, right? And that's a little secret nobody really knows. And depending on how the night goes, it's two drinks of soda and crayon to one drink with Red Bull. But I, it is an interesting time where we get to see and be around people that probably some of my best relationships came out of some of those kind of late night run-ins, because everyone's kind of out and about. And Dylan, people like blow us up when we're out, like, where are you guys going to be? Because people want that hour, that intimacy that we have as a squad. We almost, you feel like kings and queens and sort of protected, because we do keep an eye on each other. We don't let anything happen to anybody. But no, it's an interesting story. I love the downtime activities. I haven't talked a lot about the boat racing. The fact that you go 200 miles an hour on the water fucking gives me goosebumps. I can't
I
even
mean, I've seen
fathom.
those things flip, right? Like,
Oh, dude,
yeah, I mean, because
people
my mom
die
was in the beer business, right, on that side of the family. And I mean, going down to Wyandotte and Detroit area and watching, Miss Budweiser and stuff, I mean, those things flip over. I mean, people, I mean, hopefully don't die, but sometimes people do die, right? When you watch those things flip, it's
one
crazy.
fucking dies every
Yeah, I mean,
season. It's the problem.
safety's come a long way. So they haven't lost someone in one of those boats since 2000. So it's been 25 years. And listen, there's close calls, but safety's come a long way. I mean, just like it has in Formula One and car racing, the
Sure.
same has been applied to boat racing. So, my view of it was controlled chaos, right? It's kind of like entrepreneurship and running your own business of like,
Yeah, no shit.
I know where I'm going, and I just don't know how I'm going to get there yet, right? And that was kind of my view of racing. So,
You should
it's
write a book. That'd be a good book, Controlled Chaos. That's a good way to look at entrepreneurism. That'd be pretty good.
it is, right? And that's what racing is for me, and that's what it's been my whole life. And I'm an only child, but my mom watched me race since I was 9 years old, and knew that was part of my life. And I don't think she loves watching me progress from 40 miles an hour in a little 15 horsepower Mercury powered outboard to a turbine powered, 28-foot, 7,000 pound boat at 200 miles an hour. But she's supportive of it, and she knows that I take it as seriously as you possibly can, and I understand the risks when I strap into the boat, and I also put a lot of trust in the people who put the boat around me to make sure that it's taken care of and safety precautions are followed. And when I own the boat, I do the same for the driver that drives for me, and he's one of my best friends, and I would never want to put him in harm's way. So there's a lot of trust involved all around, right? But again, that 200 miles an hour, there's nothing like it when you're watching it creep from 196, 7, 8, 9, and everything starts to slow down around you, and you can actually focus in on what's ahead of you, and it's hard to describe what that silence is, but yeah, it's pretty magical.
Wow.
It's amazing. Um, Rich, you have anything you want to ask Dylan? I basically have run this entire dialogue, so I don't apologize because it's my motif.
I think it'd be, I mean, TJ and I have talked, I mean, we've talked about kind of our health regime. We've talked about skin. I mean, you're not even old enough we can't even talk to you about colonoscopies yet because you're too young. I mean,
He's not too young, actually. He's not too young. We're
well,
seeing we're seeing colon
they're
cancer in
bringing it
30 and
down,
40
but I
year
mean,
olds.
come on. No, it's true. Take it. Yeah, take care of yourself.
Just go
But I
get
mean,
done.
we had talked about this. Not fun. Well, it cleans you out. You feel very clean after, for sure. I'm
My
curious, Dylan. I mean, obviously, stepping in as a CEO to another company. I'm curious, like with, I guess TJ and I have talked about it a little bit. Like if you think about what you would tell a new entrepreneur or tell, that guy starting, what's that? And I hate to say it because it's usually more than one piece of advice, but when you think about it, like what's on your head or what's in your heart that you would tell someone like, hey, you should do this, or hey, you should do that, or hey, don't forget about that. Like, I'm just
Yeah,
curious what you would say.
I think if I had to like boil it into one thing is don't be the smartest person in the room. Um,
Right.
I mean, I have a lot of other tactical stuff of like, yeah, make sure you're tracking finance, right? Like, let's start there. But I
Right.
mean, the number one thing would just be put smarter people around you. I always had this philosophy of like, I would never hire someone dumber than me because it's an awful strategy.
Yeah,
So my whole leadership team, like, I just wanted the best people for the job,
that's
and I
great.
wanted them to have their own unique opinions and perspectives. And my job, in my view, was to help kind of position and package the decision we're going to make and help push it down into the business. But I wanted everyone's perspective on how we're going to get there, right? So, yeah, hiring just like seasoned people, or if you're going to take a swing, make sure you have the right person you're taking a swing on, right?
No,
Because,
I think that's great. I
it can
mean, I
be
think because I
detrimental.
think some out of maybe insecurity, right? There's times where all of us, we want to be right or we want to have the best idea, but if you want to build the best company, you got to have people around you that have good ideas too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's great.
So I have a follow up on that for you, Dylan, because I totally agree, right? Don't be the smartest guy in the room and definitely don't talk the most in the room. But how do you balance finding, mentoring, and grooming the 23-year-old you that's coming up behind us and looking for an opportunity and looking for a chance, but maybe doesn't have the intellect maturity yet, or doesn't have the velocity of career yet? Like, how do you view that? Because you've been mentored by Richard and directly and then indirectly by lots of other people, but how do you view this idea of trying to find that the next you, quite frankly?
I mean, my view of it, like I was so persistent with Richard from the time I was 14 years old, right? Like Richard raced boats. That's how we ended up knowing each other. Family, I wouldn't say friends, but we would be acquaintances and we'd be in passing since I was a young kid. But I was so persistent to have a mentor. And, my family, I grew up in a blue collar family who has done phenomenal for themselves, right? My dad was a machinist, started at Runne Tool, which back in, my grandfather's dying tool shop, and kind of ended up being a machinist at this company called Jessel Valve Train, which was focused in the manufacturing for motorsports. They do a lot of valve train engine components for NASCAR and NHRA and IMSA and all the major series. But he was a machinist in a two-car garage, and 45 years later, he's the CEO and owns the company, and they're in a 60,000 square foot, pretty state-of-the-art facility, right? The punchline of me saying all that is he didn't know how to direct me in life, right? And not to discredit or anything. It was either, well, why don't you come be an engineer and work for me, or what does your school say to do? They just didn't have the experience. I was an only child. I was the first one in my family to go to college on that side. So there wasn't a ton of guidance. And if I didn't have a mentor to help me kind of understand what was out there in the world, I don't know. I probably would be an engineer today. Well, actually, I tried to be an engineer and I failed out of that. So I don't think I'd be an engineer today. I'd probably be working for my dad, which is still something I would love to do at some point in time because we have a great relationship. Um, but I needed to have that mentor, and I was so persistent about finding someone outside of the ecosystems that I lived in, which was very much blue collar, hands on. And quite frankly, I didn't think there was enough money to be made there. And I grew up in a super affluent town, which was heavily Wall Street focused. And quite frankly, I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder to say, how do I get out of the middle class, right? And how do I kind of propel myself? And Richard drove a red McLaren around back in 2012, maybe right when I was in college. And I went up to him and I said, "Listen, man, I don't know what you do, but I want to figure it out." And he said, "Call me back when you're looking for an internship." And I stayed on him, right? We didn't know each other. I would shoot him some texts, and then finally, I was 20 and called him up and said, "Hey, I'm looking for an internship." He said, "Well, shit, I'm not going to give one. You don't know how to do anything." And I said, "Well, what the fuck, man? Like, you told me to call you." He was like, "Well, yeah, you can call me, but it didn't say I was going to give you one." So he said, "Prove to me that you know how to do something." He said, "Go build me a commerce site." And I'm like, "I don't even know what commerce is, man." And he's like, "That's a you problem. Figure it out." So I got online, and my uncle had a small business, small manufacturing business. My whole family was kind of in that blue collar machinist industry, and he was doing some small engine manufacturing. So I built a Shopify site for him and presented it out to his management team. And he said, "All right, I'll take you on at Razorfish at the time after he sold Crown to Publicis." And I ended up being a BA there, but it was the mentorship, right? And I think it was the persistency of just saying like, I just want to say yes. Like, let
What a
me
great
figure it
story.
out,
I mean,
right?
that's an amazing story. And I think mentoring, I mean, when I was coming in, like, I wish I would have done more. I mean, there were people that I think believed in me. And that makes a huge difference when I think back to teachers, certain people that took a risk on me, certain teachers that are like, "Hey, you're really good at this. Like, hey, look at this book, try this out." That people believed in me more than I believed in myself a little bit. But I think that's such an important thing because I have mentors. I mean, throughout my whole business, I had a coach and a mentor that I wouldn't have built the business I built without it, right? And people around me and bringing in good people, like you're saying. like Norm, great person to have around me, and Dave. I mean, there are those people that, make a difference. But I think what an important message, and I just want to double click on that and underline it, like find someone, right? And you were good at it to, be persistent. That's pretty awesome. I can promise you at 14, I wasn't looking for a mentor. I was
Yeah,
looking for a beer. I was trying to get someone to buy me beer, at the corner store.
I've carried it today, and I'll go back to TJ. What I would give to the younger generation entrepreneurs is like keep knocking on doors and get someone to believe in you, and keep saying yes. I think I probably to my detriment at some points, but I took on a lot at those points. So I'd get a task and I would say, "Yep, I know how to do it," and then I'd be like, "Holy shit, I have no clue how to do this," right? So I ended up in some situations where I was definitely bullshitting my way out of it in pretty large corporate settings. I remember being on site at Accenture doing a Hybris 6.3 training, and I didn't know Hybris from the last 3 years. Like I didn't know what even 6.3 was, right? So I was learning it and training this executive team on how to use the platform. So it probably bit me a few times, and you make it successful, but yeah, I just don't see the people saying yes as much. I think people are afraid to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, which you just need to get outside your comfort zone and commit to something. That's how you learn. And like I was a big, this was a Richardism that he always put on me. He was like, dude, I'm only asking you to be right 51% of the time. He's like, if you're 51% of the time right, he was like, we're still winning. He was like, if you cross over the chasm of 50, then we got some problems, right? But like, we can live with 51. And
That's pretty
so
good.
many people are focused on perfection that they don't want to just say yes because they don't understand it. And if you don't make the mistakes, you don't learn, right? And it's kind of cliche of, oh, you got to make these mistakes, but it's so true, right? Like I would rather deliver something at 80% of the way there and only have to iterate at the next 20% and have someone guide me on that 20% opposed to saying, I don't even know where to start, and then have them walk me through from 10% to 20% to 30%, right? I'd rather just take my swing. So
To get my first white collar job, which is I won't get into the story, but I literally straight up lied. And then on my first day, I was a release engineer. And the woman I was working for who didn't want me working with her, her boss put me in there. She's like, yeah, do a disc copy. And I was like, a what? She goes, a disc copy. I'm like, how you spell that? She's like, disc copy. I'm like, yeah, I still, that's not computing with me, to be honest. I think I was already 21. And she knew that that was the moment. And there was no fucking Google. There was nothing. It was like, you either knew what the fuck you were doing or you were full of shit. And she literally she had to explain the job that I talked myself into getting to me. So longer,
had a
longer,
pretty
longer.
good one of those with Kyle when he was at Lucky Brand. Uh, we were doing an endless aisle project on Salesforce for the store associates with an iPad, and at the time, this was before Stripe and the card reader. So he was like, "Yeah, I would love to be able to transact on an iPad there with a card reader." And I was like, "Oh, that's easy, of course. Like, why couldn't you do that?" So I was just like, "Yeah, I'll get it done for you." So I start going through this process and realize that like this actually isn't possible, right? You need to build an SDK for it, and like this project I quoted them for 60 grand is going to be like 3 million bucks to accomplish here. So I ended up in front of the entire executive team, and I figured out a way to make it work, but realized I only made it work on a desktop computer and not an iPad, and just fumbled the ball in front of the CEO of Lucky Brand, the CIO, who was a good friend of mine now. Um, yeah, that was my first time. I got my hand slapped pretty good for just saying yes. So listen, you got to find the balance with it, but
Right.
I think again, I'd rather be right 51% of the time and make 49% mistakes than never make a mistake at all and never take a shot.
That's awesome.
51% thing because that's probably about my average. And I had Eric on the other side, maybe 52. I'd say 52, but I'll say 54. I'll go with my age. I was right
There you go.
54% of the
And
time.
hopefully it goes up with your age, right?
Yeah.
So, I'll say 59.
Well, I'm a lot more selective about my decisions now. I say yes, but the tools that are available for us to upskill,
Absolutely.
there's no reason to not say yes because even if you're talking out of your sneakers or tennis sneakers, whatever you call them, Rich, um,
Tennis
the,
shoes.
the entire world is literally willing to give us a crash course in anything we're interested in putting time into, right? Like I'm in the rabbit hole of AI right now, and it's fascinating. Audio, video, imagery, generative text is it's
So
fun.
many resources at your disposal now
Yeah.
to not say yes. I think it's just a detriment to it. I mean,
It's
I'll give
enormous.
you one last story because it's kind of funny, but how I got my job at Accenture, I was in the high-risk AEM world for my first stint of my career, right? So that's all I knew. I didn't even know commerce existed outside of high-risk and AEM, right? I don't even think I actually understood what I did on high-risk and AEM. But I got this interview for a Salesforce, delivery role or BA role, or whatever it is. I didn't put two and two together that Demandware was acquired by Salesforce, right? So I went to this interview and he says, tell me about your experience. And I go, okay, well, Hybris and so on and so forth. And he says, well, tell me about Salesforce. And I was like, great CRM, solid CRM product. And he's like, well, what about the commerce product? And I'm like, I got nothing for you, man. And I just never correlated that. Yeah, Salesforce acquired Demandware, and that's where this whole thing started from. And that was guy Jeff Ryan. He was like an MD at Accenture. Interviewed me on a rooftop in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and yeah, I fumbled the ball, but kind of pulled it back there. And I was like, oh yeah, Demandware. Let me talk to you about that, right? And yeah, you just sometimes commit.
That's
Listen,
awesome.
these are all the little things that no one thinks we ever went through, and and we all did. Dylan, we've got a little bit more time left. You have anything you want to ask Rich and I?
Man, oh man, put me on the spot a little bit.
Well, you have unfettered access to us. I can't imagine you have anything unless you're looking for a quick recipe for later.
I might need that. I think I'm doing chicken cutlets tonight and some vegetables. But I got a question for Rich, right? And I think like around the mentorship side of things, you've done a phenomenal job transitioning from being the entrepreneur to helping people all around, right? Through your courses and through your socials and stuff. Like, what was that compelling moment to say, like, I want to provide this knowledge out to people?
That's a great question. I mean, you guys both had a lot of people in your companies, and I think part of what really turned me on as I grew my company was doing training, and really I started getting this sense of my responsibility was greater. I guess if that makes sense, right? I mean, obviously you feel that responsibility. You're supporting people. You have a paycheck. They have children. They have spouses. I know at least the three of us, we all felt that. Like that's a big thing. But I kind of, as I was growing, because I decided at some early point that I was going to be stoic. Like stoic was the way to go, right? Like as a guy, you're just supposed to be stoic. Don't ever show anyone a weakness. And by the way, weakness meant a feeling, right? If someone asks if you're afraid, you're like, no, I'm not afraid. Or you hurt? No way. I mean, maybe anger was the only good one because you could use that on the sports field, right? But I think I kind of started getting this concept of how can I help people a little more. And it started with let's focus on the customer. And you guys know, like customers call and they're like, our website is down, and they're screaming at, someone in support. Right. And I was trying to be like, can I arm them a little better to understand, like, put yourself in that person's shoes, understand what's going on. They might lose their job. They're scared. They're hurt. They're upset. Someone's yelling at them and they're yelling at you. You can't react back, right? You can't, and regardless of what's going on. So I started getting this concept like, hey, we have this tornado going on with all these feelings. You just can't throw it on them and be defensive and be like, it's not our fault. I mean, because the first thing you want to say is, it's not our fault. We didn't do it. It's not our fault. I'm like, it doesn't matter if it's our fault or not. Just be with them. I hear you. Let me check into it. I'll get right back to you, right? Like that kind of a response. And so, I kind of started getting this sense, and maybe this is too big, but like if I can just help people be a little more aware, right? That then they can make better choices, and then they feel more authority in their life, and they feel like I am authoring my life, right? So it started getting me to this, I like this developmental model. If I can teach people just like fear, hurt, anger, sadness, joy, just feelings, not good or bad, just feelings, right? And so I kind of started getting in, like I was just at East Tennessee State University with the men's golf team, like teaching them this model. Like if you just can understand, you don't have to do anything different, but just be aware. right? Like think of like, I think you guys here, like you understand this concept of awareness, right? Just be aware of what's going on around you. Just open your eyes a little bit, and with that awareness, then you have choice. And it doesn't mean we always, I mean, the 51% is beautiful because we don't always make the best choice, right? There's those 49% where we may be aware, but we still like, fuck it, I'm gone. But if we can do the 51 and be like, okay, I'm going to make this choice. So it started me thinking like, what impact could I have on the world, right? And if I could work with leaders and if I could make them into more aware and conscious leaders and kind of what I would call a transformational leader, because then I can spread to more people, right? Through these leaders, right? So these young entrepreneurs, these people, because they have cultures and they're talking to people. And if we can, I mean, this is big, right? But if we can make a kind of a little bit more of a conscious world, right? Where people are realizing like what I do has an impact. Like even Movember, right? We're just coming out of Movember, right? The beard's, big. I haven't trimmed it. But I mean, ask someone how they're doing, right? I mean, I was doing some posts last week. Like, it's not that fucking hard. And I probably know 8 people that have committed suicide. 8 people personally. A couple high school friends, a guy I coach soccer with. It's heartbreaking. So if I can make, I'm saying for men, but for everyone, why couldn't that guy have called me and be like, hey, dude, I'm going through a hard time. Can we have a chat? Or why didn't I call him? And get it like, just because you're feeling afraid and just because you're feeling hurt, it's not a bad thing, dude. We all go through our dark periods of the soul. Reach out. It's cool, right? So that was a super long answer, but hopefully it made sense.
I mean, I think it just all comes full circle to sharing knowledge and having the right people around you. And like, I think the crux of this whole conversation today was like how grateful I think we all can be to have just great people around, right? From the start
100%.
to now. And I think my goal would be to continue to share that knowledge out to me. Like I'm just, Richard found me at 14 and for some reason said, I'm going to write off a check that I don't think I'm ever going to see a return on to try to see if this kid has a shot. Right. Like, I don't think I could ever, repay that favor to a person. Right. And hopefully our success did, but, just being there for the hard days. Right. And
Yeah.
being there for people around you on the hard days, I think is super important. Sometimes it's not the business call you need to make, but it's just the shoulder to almost, to cry on,
Totally.
right? There's a lot of dark days for all of us. So yeah, I love that.
Well, I think that's what, when TJ said to me, hey, let's do this podcast, Tea with Rich. And, and I think, being real, right? I mean, that was kind of the tagline. And TJ, you came up with it. Like, let's just be real with people, right? Because I think we can have an impact in just being real. We're not perfect. We're just regular people, but we come on and have real conversations. Hopefully someone listens and they take a little piece, right?
You hit on just being real. I think, unfortunately, social media has, I think, while it's had such positive impacts in some ways, it's also had a lot of negative impacts of people not being real and
right.
perceiving to be something they're not, right? And I think that impacts a lot of people of, why am I not this successful yet, right? Because they see the guy on Instagram with the cars, but they don't know that the cars are, out on 20-year payment terms, right? They don't understand that it's all this stuff that I think perception's not so much reality anymore.
Right.
And I think being real and talking about, this is not an easy thing. And it doesn't have to do with waking up at 5 a.m. and meditating, getting a cold plunge and doing all this stuff. It has to do with working hard and, you're going to have some tears, and it's about putting good people around you. I think it's about being empathetic to those situations and also being humble in those of like, this is not an easy game. And there's a lot worse days than good days most times. Right. And I don't think people hear enough of the reality of the world where all they see is the outcomes and the successes. And I think that's the hardest part that, men specifically, I think right now, and women too, it's a hard place to be a girl in this day and age with the social media era. But they need people like that to be real. So I think it's great what you guys are doing and love that you're just keeping it real here.
Well, we love having you on and sharing that too, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the dialogue. I think the whole concept behind getting real is for anyone that sits down and actually really listens to any of these podcasts, there are nuggets of wisdom, but you have to be paying attention. It's easy to pull the simple stuff out, but the deep stuff is you gotta be paying attention, right? And you know, the whole goal here is to shoot the shit and get real and be honest and be raw and talk
And
about things
TJ
that
and I, we just we miss each other, so we get an opportunity to chat. That's really, I mean, and then other people like to listen to it. That's awesome.
and every once in a while we bring a guest in. But Dylan, it's a joy to have you on here. I know we've been talking about it for a while, but I wanted to make sure you had some space out of VML and all of that stuff going on there. I also kind of thought you would take a little bit of a break. I'm a little alarmed that I think you told me one time you had an 18-minute break between leaving VML and taking over at the
I had
point.
a negative 8 hour break if it's technically when my last day was, but I don't know. I think I'm dangerous with too long of a break, so I think everyone was pretty concerned if I took time off of what would happen there. And I might have been saying you might have found me either in Mexico or New Hampshire, probably too often there, but
That would have been all right, brother.
or it would have been cars and watches, either one. But yeah, no, it's good. I appreciate you guys having me on. This has been fun, and hopefully we collectively shared something today that helps someone down the road.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's been both. It's been cars, watches, and the trip to New Hampshire. And I'm coming to New York next week, which
It has been all the above.
that we didn't talk about. And yes, I will be at NRF. I'm going to come down for a few days, and I'm going to go see a UFC fight in Vegas on Saturday, and then I'm going to fly straight to New York on Sunday and spend a couple of days there. Mainly because this is when we all get to hang out and spend time together.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
we don't have to be out really late, but we have to be out. I think that's a big deal. Dylan, thanks for coming on, bud. I appreciate you taking an hour plus out of your day. It means a lot. It's good to see you. I know we text a lot, but we haven't had a chance to shoot the shit. Rich, I'm psyched that you have started your winter hibernation down in Mexico.
No, this is just 1 week. I'm back. We come back Saturday.
Oh, you do? So you're going to fly up
Yeah,
for
we're
my
not starting the
holiday party?
winter hibernation till after Christmas. So
Are you
this
going
is
to come
just
up on the
Thanksgiving.
14th? Are you going to fly up for my
Yeah, I
holiday?
think that's what I was asking you. So I think I might come to New York. So I'll figure it out.
For
We'll
NRF.
chat.
No, I was
Yeah.
talking about the party that I sent you an invite to, my
Oh,
holiday party.
maybe I was looking at that. Yeah, I would. I need to look at that because I would love to come. Thanks for the invite, by the way.
Well, hey, listen, I'll find room for it. But first of all, if you showed up, I think people would shit. Eric is not going to be here because Rachel turns 50. Eric Dovier is my former business partner for anyone not listening. But yeah, no, I'll be at NRF, and then I'm in New York next week. So Dylan and I are going to a charity event on Tuesday, Grassroots Soccer with Ethan Zahn.
Oh, be
a very good
careful.
friend.
Be careful.
Yeah, it's a charity
I know
event.
you guys at charity events.
This is not like the other things that I wrote Dylan into. So this is going to be a mellow night. There's no it's
I have my Q4 in-person board meeting at 9 a.m. the next morning, so it's got to be relatively tame. I'm trying to give them some confidence that we have this thing under control going forward. So
yeah, you said one.
if I
You
roll-
said get you back to your room by 1. I think that's fine. The
I
event
think
goes
one's
till
fair.
9:30, and then the after party goes till whenever. It's in the same place, so we'll be fine. And then I'm there for the week and eating at a bunch of restaurants. I think I told the story about a chef who I became very close with who passed away the day before Father's Day. So we're eating at all of his restaurants while we're there. And I'm actually
cool.
bringing Dylan and B up to Saga. So the 4 of us are going to go eat at this place on the 63rd
Awesome.
floor on Pine Street, which is going to be pretty amazing. But I digress. See, I'm shooting the shit at the end now. Normally we do this in the beginning. Dylan, I'm going to let you get back. I'm sure you got a bunch of emails and text messages and shit. Super appreciate your time. Appreciate you taking so much time with us today. I actually appreciate the real rawness of your dialogue and answering questions and
100%.
kind of letting us get to know you a little more. And Rich, I love you to death. So I enjoy these. I'll see you
Love
again
you too,
soon.
brother.
Dylan, don't
Thanks, Dylan.
don't hang up
Thanks, guys.
when we stop this. Thanks, guys. For everyone still listening, welcome to another episode of Tea with Rich. We appreciate you. Have a good day. Bye.